Thank you everyone for joining the presentation today on Marketing Cloud Strategies at Work. I'm thrilled to be talking today with Chris Breeks, who's a founding partner at Major Tom, and Sarah Hudjagai, who is a solution engineer with Salesforce. I'm David Jenkins. I'm the VP of Data-Driven Marketing at Traction On Demand. We've got some great content today spanning across the strategies and content you can think about, how to enable Marketing Cloud, and hopefully you'll get some very useful takeaways from this. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who is going to provide a bit of background on why we're talking about this.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Okay, so let's begin. So really, we are at a time where engagement with brands have changed from in-store engagement to online. Consumers want and expect better experience. In fact, we have found that 80% of customers say that the experience a company provides is equally as important as the products and services. With the changes, there always comes a bit of a power switch. So previously, it was up to the marketer and the business that decided where and when a customer can purchase a product and how. And however, with more and more product agnostic sites such as Amazon, the power has shifted to the consumer on when they can purchase and where. Another fun fact with a recent marketing report, we have shown that 64% of consumers expect engagement with them in real time, meaning the online engagement model has to mimic an in-person experience. So really that traditional methods of attract, convert, and grow is close to extinction as we enter a new era of know, personalize, and engage. And this is a model that you're going to hear us constantly come back to. So what does this mean? It's mean that you need to know your customer's online digital footprint, personalize your message and offerings to them based on that footprint, and then engage with them on the channel that they want to be engaged with. So the biggest reason why we're all here today is the big question: how can marketers meet the expectations of today's customers? So this is what we're going to get into, and how are we going to really achieve this? And really, let's get real and talk about the 3 key pieces needed for great marketing. So we are going to talk about the right strategy. We're going to talk about the right content, and finally getting the right technology in your tool belt. So from here, I'm going to pass it to Chris.
I'm Chris from Major Tom, and we're going to kick things off by talking about defining your strategy and objectives, and going to take a little bit of a step back and look at things from a big picture and things that you need to have in place in order to execute on that strategy. So first of all, I want to talk about target market alignment. Things have changed because of COVID. And has your target market updated since then? And do you have alignment across your team and across your leadership? So for example, your target market should be easily communicated by anyone on your leadership team. And here's an example: brand managers and chief marketing officers at forward-thinking business to consumer companies that have at least 100 million in revenue that are in the following verticals: CPG, health and beauty, and electronics. I think you can take your target market a little bit further than that. And, quite often we're talking to marketers and they say, well, I want to target everyone everywhere. But unless you have an infinite budget, that is difficult to do. So perhaps you're selling surfboards. And so the west side of the United States is, the Western United States is where you want to look at your target customer. I think too, it's also important when evaluating your target market that you have an alignment with values. So for example, our values are, we're looking for companies to work with that are hungry for growth and open to change. They see us as a partner. They don't want us to just work for them. And that they truly see value in what we offer, and that it's not a commoditized product in their mind. In order to define your target market, this might be an exercise that you need to do, but you can do this without a lot of resources or big time commitment. And you can do this internally with your team. So you can conduct interviews with stakeholders and the senior executives within the company or the owners of the business. Also talk to your customers and your users. Ask them how they feel about your brand and who you should be targeting. Talk to peers or other subject matter experts in your field, friends, acquaintances. And again, this could be a 20-minute, 30-minute phone call for each of these different groups. You can get it done in a week. When you're talking to your customers, I think it's important to ask them about their challenges, their problems, their pain points, how they're engaging with your brand, what they like, what they don't like, and have that very honest conversation. And you can do that in a variety of different ways, either on a one-on-one basis with a customer that you know, or through surveys. I think it's also important to understand, what their motivations are or what their values are when they're looking at your brand. How are you going to make their life easier? Or why are they coming to your company for what you're offering? I'm going to talk very briefly about persona development. I'm sure everyone knows about personas, but I want to use an example of a persona that may need revisiting because of the current status of the world. So we're going to take Pat, a gender agnostic name, but let's say Pat's in the early 30s, currently lives in the city, probably in a trendy area, is up on technology, subscribes to some different podcasts. In their work life, they're consistently low on resources. They're looking for ways to make their work life easier. Personally right now, Pat is thinking about is working from home and is thinking about, hey, how can I work remotely or go and work in the woods? What I'm getting at is that their needs have changed and likely your personas have changed. And so they probably need a bit of tweaking and revisiting. So when looking at personas, really what we want to do is design content that is targeted specifically to the needs of that persona. So what content does Pat want to see? What's going to make their life easier? And then, understanding what their goals and motivation are. And the motivation might be, that they want to get great results so that they can impress their boss. If they can impress their boss, maybe their boss is going to be more open about them working remotely, and they can go find that place in the woods far away from everything where they can work remotely. What I'm getting at, though, is that what is it that is important to Pat in their everyday life, and how can you match your content in some way to recognize that or address that? In the previous slide we saw that, or one of the previous slides we saw that they might be interested in technology or podcasts. Maybe that's something that you should be evaluating for your company or your brand. When looking at your content and planning for effective content, we want to look at the end goal and what is the primary goal. And of course, the primary goal is usually more business or more transactions or more acquisitions. But in your role, what can you affect? And what are the activities that lead to success? And putting a line in the sand, how much of an increase from where you are today is this goal? So for example, if we need to acquire 1,000 more email addresses a month, and you're already getting 4,000 a month, and you want to add 1,000, so you're getting to 5,000 a month, okay, that's a growth of 25%. And by acquiring those email addresses, that's ultimately going to help the revenue down the road. So deciding on what kind of content you're going to produce, there's lots of different options. The options are changing. In community and social awareness stories, looking at the sensitive climate that we're in right now, and adjusting your brand's tone and voice to account for that. There's a lot of new options with Instagram and Facebook in terms of interactive experiences that you can have, or dynamic experiences where you're merging video and images and lead generation forms or contesting into those social ads and social experiences. And of course, what other content? Contests, microsites and landing pages. What about animated GIFs? And, thinking about Pat again, are we ready to tackle that podcast? And do we have the resources to tackle that podcast? Who's going to manage that podcast? Also, who's going to build the landing pages that we need, the microsites, develop that email copy and the website copy and all of the supporting blog posts, as well as the social media content. We probably have to bring in the social media team or contractor as well. When it comes to video production, who's going to write the script and edit it and edit the video afterwards? At the end, who's going to host the podcast? Who's going to manage the podcast? Who's going to make sure that it goes out on every month or every week? And who's going to market it? How are you going to solicit reviews and comments and feedback? Switching gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about some of the components of an effective campaign. And I think, similar to that overall target market mission statement that we had at the beginning, what is your content marketing mission statement? So in this example, we're going to focus on a content strategy with the end goal of capturing the user's email address and the permission to engage. Now, that should be a given in today's day and age, but we're focusing more on acquiring that email address. And why is that? Well, the times are changing. So Google has said that in about 16 months, by the end of 2021, they're going to kill the third-party cookie. Now, that sounds very dramatic, and what it means is that there's going to be less ability to buy advertising on a grand scale through third-party sellers. Of course, Facebook's cookies are still going to work. Google's cookies are certainly still going to work, but it puts more of an emphasis on capturing that email address or capturing their cell phone address through an SMS campaign. So how are you going to get their email address, or how are you going to get their cell phone number so you can engage with them? Of course, you can get that through transactions, but you can also get that through in-store signage with an SMS call to action, where they're engaging that way. And I'm probably going to map their email address later, and David's going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. Through account registration or subscription or gated content, another way to capture the email address, but there's also loyalty programs that you could potentially plug in that you may or may not be evaluating that will encourage registration and sign up, as well as customer service through contact forms and feedback forms, as well as surveying. And not, you need to capture email addresses. So how are we going to do some prospecting to get potential customers to fill out that survey? There's some different systems that do that. And of course, calls to action on your website to get people to subscribe to your content, whether that's newsletter or other forms of content.
And I think, Chris, just to add one point to that, it's really valuable to think about how can you capture this contact information in the simplest way possible for the prospect or the customer. So it's not a long form with a lot of questions you want to ask. It's simple. Give me your email address, potentially give me your name, or in a store, text to join to sign up for an offer, and then progressively profile and gather information subsequently as you build other campaigns to communicate with the customer.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. I think that it's important too that you maintain a consistent tone, so that if that customer, that prospect is going from social media and then to your website, and then they're getting an email from you, that there's a consistent voice and it doesn't feel fragmented or disjointed. And that if you have multiple writers, which we often do, that you have one senior editor or someone that's making sure that we have a match for tone and theme. As well as, I think it's important to look at the look and feel as well, in terms of the branding and the colors that you're using, and make sure that there's a match there with your content. So, quick checklist: what tools do you have in your toolbox? I want to make sure that we have absolutely a content calendar or editorial calendar that dictates what content is coming up, and also what the frequency is going to be. Is that weekly content? Is that monthly content? What are those categories and topics? And are those agreed to by the team and the leadership team? Does that match our target market that we kick things off with first? And does it also match our end goal of acquiring that, that customer or that prospect's information? I think it's important to have rules of engagement. So content do's and don'ts, what you will talk about, what you won't talk about, how you talk about it, as well as it's important to have an SEO strategy and plan. And whoever's producing content for the website or that gated content, anything that's going to be found by a search engine spider, that the writers are thinking about keywords that they can interject while they're producing that content, so it ranks well in the search engines, or that your video ranks well in YouTube. I mean, people don't think of YouTube as a search engine, but it's the second biggest search engine. How you name and describe your video is going to dictate whether or not it comes up. Just like this webinar, probably going to end up on YouTube. Hopefully people find it. When looking at your content, when measuring your content, rather, I should say, I think that scorecards and dashboards are amazing. So, you know, what is the number of conversions by channel or number of acquisitions by channel, and what's the ROI per channel or cost per acquisition? I mean, a lot of us are looking at these big data sets that can be overwhelming. So like, what are the 10 or 12 or maybe 15 key performance indicators? What are those things that we want to measure that are important for our business, and also that are going to lead to success down the road? And this is something that we've implemented in the last couple of years for ourselves, and it's changed my world. You know, I'm not looking at time on site or bounce rate as much, or when you log into Google Analytics, you see, you know, just information overload. What are the 10 or 12 things that really matter to me? Put it into a dashboard, put it into a scorecard, look at those on a weekly basis. If they're low, mark them red. If they're green, mark them with an arrow in the right direction. I think also, you know, measuring engagement, and what does healthy engagement look like? Are people consuming your content? It's the worst when you publish content and no one's sharing it, no one's liking it. All right, so what's your strategy for adding advertising dollars and budget to that? Moving on.
Chris, I might just add one thing on the KPIs, which I see as being important, is as you're doing that, having an effective testing strategy around that is very, very important. And a lot of testing cloud, there's some fantastic tools for that, but thinking about how you can build a plan around your testing to turn it into continuous learning rather than the 2 days before I launch a campaign, let's work out what we're going to test. You need to plan this out and have a learning strategy that can help you get better and better over time.
Thank you, David. I know I'm getting excited. I'm talking a mile a minute. So thank you for interjecting there. Got a couple of ideas on how you can develop content, because during COVID, it can be challenging to produce content. You're not doing as many video shoots or photo shoots. So, you know, recognizing that a fully baked out evergreen journey or an always on journey might have 156 pieces of content that someone could engage in, or a group could engage in from start to finish. So, but that 156 pieces of content could be micro content. That could be a thank you page or a thank you email, or small calls to action. But what I think that you could do is you can, when looking at producing content, you can recycle and you repurpose your existing content. And then you can chop that up into different pieces and use it. Like if you've got a great video, you can use 4 15-second clips for an Instagram ad, right? So the idea being is that you cook one piece of content, once, and then eat 10 times off of that content by chopping it up into different pieces. Kind of botched that, but I think you get the gist of it. One of my favorite ways to develop content, like when you have analysis paralysis and you are trying to produce a blog post or even website content or landing page content, get your watch or your phone and turn on the record button. You can download some apps that are either free or very inexpensive, like $5. Put that phone on a table, crack open a bottle of wine, and get a friend to interview or a colleague to interview, and just let it flow. And you should write these questions in advance, of course, but if you could just get talking, then take that recording and send it to someone on Upwork or Fiverr to transcribe for you. They're going to send you back a Google Doc that has just a information dump of everything that you talked about, and you can start to separate that into different stories, maybe send that over to a copywriter, and within a week, you'd be amazed what you can crank out. 3 blog posts, a whole website worth of copy from like a 1-hour session. So imagine if you really put some time and effort into that. One other content brainstorming exercise is to have a workshop on a dedicated day with key people from your team. They can be from different departments, so you get different perspectives, and you can use a book like Game Storming that has a ton of fun exercises that you can do over Zoom or in a small group, socially distanced, of course, but that you can come up with content ideas, and that the loudest voice doesn't always win, that you can hear from other people as well. One important thing to note, you need people that when they come up with great ideas, they need to stay involved to help execute that idea. We don't just need idea generators, we need doers for developing this content. I think that's over to you now, David.
So thanks for that, Chris. It was great to get some excellent background into defining an effective strategy, putting some good content together. Obviously, once you have that strategy and content together, the Marketing Cloud plays a fundamentally important role in distributing that strategy out to, or distributing that content out to the prospects and customers that you're trying to target. And what I want to talk about today in this section is not the entire Marketing Cloud tool, but focus a bit more around customer journeys and the Journey Builder tool, and how that is such a fundamentally important part of enabling an effective Marketing Cloud strategy. So one thing to bear in mind as we talk about customer journeys and we talk about the Marketing Cloud is we're not just talking about email automation. It is way broader than that. The tool set itself obviously scales across all channels you may be communicating on. So we often think about, how do you communicate well in email? How do you overlay that with effective SMS messaging? How may you have a mobile push app that you can leverage? But beyond that, there are tools like interactive video that support how do you build an effective connected communication set into your website and to target customers in the ad space, and also managing that with in-store or customer service messaging that is aligned. The more we can align that messaging, the more powerful the tool set is to drive a coherent conversation with customers. Obviously, we want to drive personalization through data and through listening to intelligent activity. And as Sarah mentioned earlier, real time is becoming an incredibly important part of this process. So this all sounds great, but in order to get there, we have this other challenge that the customer's not doing what we want in a nice linear model. They tend to be all over the place in terms of what they're doing. They may be in consideration phase for one set of products. They may have just converted to another product. They may be in a very early stage awareness in a different business group in your company, or they may just be bouncing around in this area and we don't actually know 100% where we should engage. So defining a linear model becomes challenging, but that's one of the powers of building a framework for Journey Builder. We can start thinking about turning on an engine that engages when someone takes an action. And that is a really important thing to think about. How can we put together a framework in the Marketing Cloud that has an always-on engine that is basically reacting to prospects and customers as they take action, and also driving customers and prospects into the website and to be aware of your products and services on a more ongoing basis. But this ability to build out some of these journeys is a super important part of making sure you have an underlying framework that drives revenue and communication for you, and you can focus on the strategic work, not the busy work of getting campaigns out there. So one thing we'd like to do is think about what are the critical pieces we need to stand up in an always-on engine. And there's some really obvious ones here, but these are really make a difference. Things like standing up a welcome campaign or journey with a series of steps when someone signs up to a newsletter or does a text to join. Things like thinking about how you can drive people back from the site, like a abandoned browse or abandoned cart communication. Things like that all-important first purchase and the flow around thanking a customer, welcoming them, informing them of next steps, and upselling and getting them to provide a customer review. All of these things should be thought about in terms of how can we turn them into multi-touch initiatives. So how do we go about that? Well, one of the things which is aligned a bit with the brainstorming exercise that Chris was talking about, when we first start thinking about a Marketing Cloud engagement, one of the things we really like to do for a few hours with clients is sit down and just whiteboard up ideas for where useful touch points are with customers. Think about your strategy and your acquisition approaches approaches and bring that together with a series of potential touch points where you should be thinking about communicating with customers. And these then form a framework for potential journeys and potential communication milestones you should be leveraging. As you put this sort of brainstorming together, people come up with a lot of ideas, and the idea is put technology behind you and just think about what you can potentially do. Once you've got these ideas in place, think about the data and content needs to support it, and think about, is it easy? Is it challenging? Is it hard? And then you can basically align these in a pretty simple message or methodology to assign a proposed value. High, medium, or low even is sufficient for this sort of brainstorming exercise. And take your data and content thinking to think about how difficult it would be to get this into the marketplace. That helps you then come up with a ranking of high priority initiatives that are high value but difficulty to implement. That then helps you build a priority roadmap as you think either about your initial implementation or think about what you're going to do as you're expanding into next phases with the tool. Once you have that, part of the key to running an effective marketing cloud strategy is how do you define your data and your AI to support this process effectively. A few of the key points that we always like to talk about here. The first one, Chris touched on really well. Think about if you're driving traffic to your website through digital ads, through word of mouth, through advertising, think about how you can convert that person into a known prospect or customer. Capturing an email address, text to join, in-store signage, all those sort of things are incredibly effective ways to begin that communication. And remember, this is doubly important, not just because of cookies, but an interesting stat is 90% of people forget about a within an hour of being there. And this is classic in the retail space where people are browse shopping across a number of sites. The more you can get sticky communication with multi-step journeys to remind people about those actions, the more chance you have of reconverting them. Once you convert someone, it's obviously important to obtain permission. Gaining that opt-in is particularly important in Canada with CASL compliance. And then thinking about the preferences and how you can progressively profile to learn more about people. One side note on preferences I always like to push on is a lot of people go heavy on filling out preference forms or getting preference options ready. Our belief is there is much more value in looking and listening to demonstrated behavior to drive and understand customers and their interests, because it's not just one preference, it changes over time. And the more you have a good content strategy that's aligned around persona content, the more you can listen and tie that behavior to persona-driven interests and define what persona a subscriber potentially lives under. Obviously, we need to build out a subscriber profile as well, as I said, by flagging that persona ideally, thinking about the segment someone is, and thinking about summary data like last visit date or last click date or purchase information. Signals then become really important, and the Marketing Cloud helps a lot here. Things like listening to website activity with listing engines like JavaScript listing engines, particularly with Interaction Studio, which is a great tool for that. The ability to listen to purchases, which we always see as that first port of call to understand more about customers to communicate well. And finally, listening to email and mobile activity. And with those signals, sometimes it's exposing it as summary level data inside the Marketing Cloud, but ideally it is leveraging great tools that come with the Einstein set in Marketing Cloud to take advantage of that. The out-of-the-box email engagement tools that tell you highly engaged people versus people at risk of unsubscribing, the send time optimization tools that automatically send at the time that we should be sending for the best engagement, and content recommendations that basically provide you with a more seamless way to turn one-to-many into a one-to-one type communication. Einstein is the scaling engine that lets you, again, deliver one-to-one communication without falling into the trap of getting so detailed and complex that you can't maintain it and you fall away from concentrating on strategy. So with that, I want to move over to Sarah, who's going to give us a bit of a view inside the Journey Builder tool.
Great. So as David was mentioning, journeys are really kind of the secret sauce of the marketing org. And what we mean by this is, yes, journeys can be used to automate the campaign, such as a simple welcome campaign going from that crawl to that walk phase. So we can see here in the journey that we've created for this particular webinar is we do have a basic journey on all contacts, just welcoming them and then giving them a special offer. As David had mentioned, after their click behavior, a few days later, having that timely communication of progressive profiling, so starting to collect more declarative data through just email alone. We also have this notion of splitting based on behaviors and starting to test that, if they didn't open their first email, then maybe let's send them a different version of it and see if that gets us further along. One area that we have found as a team, a lot of marketers struggle with is the notion of testing, and it's the best thing you can do because you're just seeing what content works and what doesn't for you. And in the Marketing Cloud, with the simple drag and drop, you're able to do that. And finally, after a couple no's, if it's still, this person's being really stubborn or they're being really stubborn, just start having fun with them and just continuing the random split and just testing different emails and seeing at what point do people start communicating back with you. Now, this is a great example of a crawl journey where you're using one of the cheaper channels such as email. It doesn't cost very much to send people email. But what we're able to do with this is when we're ready to take that next step and we're ready to kind of start doing that cross cloud communication is we can do things like send them into an ad audience on a specific platform, whether that be Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google. Our studies here at Salesforce have shown that there's about a 70% increase in conversions when we are coupling emails with ads, which is really quite fabulous that we're able to really do that. What's great about this is in this ad, it's your data, it's your first party data. So it is going to land in front of someone rather than be a guess. Now from here, this is great to go from crawling to walking, but what does running look like? Those key pieces that Chris was talking about when it comes to persona and actually leveraging Einstein. So we did also build out a persona-based journey to speak through today. So this is when you're ready to start running, when you're ready to, you've started doing your crawls and your walks, and now you want to get a little more one-to-one with your consumers. We can see here Einstein has come to help us with persona splits and splitting out into a couple different categories, such as our loyalists. These are the people that they're going to purchase every single time. And they will most of the time where you're going to have those high conversion rates. To your selective subscribers where they have pretty good open rates, but high click rates. So you want to kind of put them down a different path, or even down to your win-back dormants. These are the people that they need a reason to come to you. So with using Einstein, you're actually allowing your contact base or your data, your entry source to kind of choose their own adventure. And it's in one area and you're able to set up these different paths. Again, what's really lovely is as you get more advanced between using the Einstein recommendation, having different types of communication. As you can see for my dormants, I'm just sending them straight text message saying, here's 50% off on these products, because I just want to get them back to us. Whereas for our selected subscriber, I'm just giving them some product recommendations. So being able to use Journey to really define which path you want a certain type of persona to go down really helps you be able to personalize at scale. And then, as I mentioned, as you get more sophisticated with your channels, you are then able to add in different kind of messaging options outside of email, such as any kind of in-app messaging if you do have app, or if you're wanting to go to text message. This is a very new, definitely very new to Marketing Canada. At least this is what I've seen. And it's really quite powerful. You are more or less guaranteed and open. So using it when you really want an action to happen. Having ad audiences, ads are not cheap no matter where you're putting them. So leveraging them so you can get optimum ROI at the right time, and obviously having that secure transfer. And last but not least, flow control. As both Chris and David spoke about, understanding when you want the next point of content to go out to them. This could be based off of duration if it's timely. This could be on a date if you have a specific event. Maybe you're waiting by attribution. So if they've given us their phone number, we want a text to go out. Or maybe they've told us that their favorite color is blue, so we're just going to show them blue Jeeps as an example, and we're in the Jeep world. Or say we have just a decision split based on a criteria, or really anything else. You also have this notion of random splitting if you're wanting to do some testing and just split the database in half and almost compare two different paths to each other and get that initial piece. So these are some great examples of how you can use the Marketing Cloud journeys to really help you create and define, both from your crawl to walk, just starting your simple transition into journeys, and then going as far as having those multi-scale. And really anyone can achieve these because it is a drag and drop simple solution.
And Sarah, just to add a couple of points onto that, one of the things we find really great about Journey Builder is for clients that have Salesforce Sales and Service Cloud in place, it is so easy to trigger real-time journeys from your Sales and Service Cloud data. And at the same time, just as we were talking about being able to overlay an ad audience with an email, if you're getting to a point where you're seeing sufficient engagement from a client or from a prospect, passing that over to a sales rep for them to be able to take action is one of the great features of this tool. So you can use Journey Builder to create a task inside Salesforce and then have that sales rep follow up with that high potential customer, which really adds to that sort of cross-channel overlay of how things work.
Thank you, David. That's definitely, great insight. The other way I always like to recommend for clients to look at journeys is, yes, you can create these automated campaigns to make your day-to-day a lot easier and have those always on, but also creating campaigns with a lot of those juicy tidbits that Chris gave you around life cycle. So some example is if you are in the awareness cycle, doing webinar series, doing anything that's going to attract them to understand you a bit more. Or if you're in the retaining stage, doing reminder campaigns. So not only using journeys as a way to automate your day-to-day, but also to attract people at different life cycles as they move on. Now, obviously this is all fine and dandy. We've built out our content and our strategy, but how do we know it's being effective? So I'm going to hand it back to Dave to chat through analytics.
Thanks, Sarah. So one of the things we wanted to make sure we cover off here is once you get a Marketing Cloud process up and running and you're effectively targeting customers through that engine, you've got a strategy that's driving more of an overall marketing strategy with content that's supporting your website and your digital communications. One of the things we really like to harp on is creating an effective learning machine. And this ability to create something that gives you clarity of, are you meeting or meeting your objectives? How are you performing with testing and so on is such an important of an effective marketing strategy. One of the challenges that most clients face is marketers need a system of record to do this work. And this is a really big challenge for a lot of marketers. As you can see, the average tech stack for a client has about 24 different data sources. So this is things like Facebook ads, Google ads, could be Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics. We've got Salesforce Marketing Cloud performing sends. We've got internal data and store sales, all that sort of information that is all impacted heavily by the marketing engagement that you're trying to drive through your marketing strategy. One of the things that we firmly believe is we need a tool to be able to consolidate that information so you really can effectively define KPIs that matter and then monitor your ROI and efficiency. And this is such an important part of how do we tie data together, all of these sources in a way that's seamless, but also isn't a massive IT project to support that. So one of the things that we're a big fan of is the acquisition that Salesforce made with Datarama over a year ago. And it has really changed the game in terms of what can be done with marketing analytics. The thing that's Datarama is it is purpose built for marketers to obtain data from a variety of sources and unify that data effectively, and then give you dashboarding that you can build around that. And the dashboarding is not just the ability to build dashboards, there's AI underlying it, so it can start to surface insights that you may not have seen. And you can really clearly define goals and have alerts coming out of the system to help you understand potentially when one of your ad groups is severely underperforming, or your deliverability in Marketing Cloud has hit a potentially low level that you need to action. All of these things can be surfaced in Datarama, which is a fabulous thing. But what's the differentiation about Datarama that makes it unique? Why isn't this just a Tableau or a Google Analytics or something like that? Well, one of the big things about Datarama that makes it so effective is it has a whole range of connectors purpose-built. So there are over 100 pre-built into ad tech KPI, ad tech technology. Things like Adobe Analytics or Google AdWords or Google 360. All of this data can be pulled into Datarama really easily. And it literally is as simple as picking, for example, Facebook ads, putting in your user credentials, and immediately it will pull the data in and start to build out dashboards for you to use, because it pulls this data into a common data model. That's already been thought out. This is not left to a data warehousing team to determine. The work is already thought out, so you can quickly go from a lot of ad sources to outcomes that help you measure the KPIs you need. Now, I will say one thing you need to make this work well is a good naming convention around your campaigns that you can use across different ad sources. But that's a process thing, and you can work and put that in place, and you should have that anyway, regardless of the presence of Datarama. But once that's in place, you can really start to get a holistic understanding of your information in a much more effective way, which helps you drive and optimize your strategy effectively. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Sarah, and she's going to give us a bit of a demo inside Datarama.
Lovely. So Datarama, I like to call it Salesforce's problem-solving purchase machine. And what I mean like this is, like many marketers, we have tons of initiatives going across channel, brands, products, and it's hard to keep track of. So, you know, let alone you have all these different set of data, but to make it match and sensible needs some kind of magic wizarding wand going on. So Datarama comes in. So as you can see out of the box, there's over 109 API connectors that we have a dedicated team maintaining all of these APIs. So that's for your Facebook. I think in the last year, they changed their APIs like 100 times. Google, Instagram, LinkedIn, just naming a few that's on this list. And our team makes sure that these APIs are up and always available, so your reports aren't affected downstream, so you're able to make those quick decisions when you're needing to give a campaign a little TLC and it's underperforming. If there's anything outside of this, we do have, you know, a mini ETL under Total and Light Connect, so you're able to also connect to things that are outside. Now, the key differentiator of Datarama is this notion of harmonization center that David spoke about in his presentation. And what harmonization center is it's really answering that pain that marketers are feeling of matching all of these different data sets. Your data in Facebook is different than your data in LinkedIn. My name on Facebook is Sarah Lightning. My name on LinkedIn is Sarah Hajagai. That's two different data right on its own. And I'm not the only one that does things like that. There are people outside that do things like that as well. So helping match all of these, so you get that final full data set, makes it a lot easier and definitely prevents all of those times. I know I personally have had them in previous roles where I'm looking at my Excel sheet and pointing at where I want the formula to work and hoping that my point will make it work, but it didn't. So just really solving that pain, because it's kind of a click to connect. And then what happens afterwards is it's as simple as it's spitting out all different types of dashboards. Now, I've used an Advertising Studio dashboard as a great example. This is one of thousands of dashboards that we can create. out of Datarama. And this one, I really like it because it talks about what our total spend is for a given period of time. We can see the amount of views and impressions that we've gotten overall, our conversions, what are sales, our total return on ad spend, and find out if it's matching our return on ad spend. We can also see which campaign is doing the best and which is maybe underperforming, so that way we can go in and give it the TLC rather than wait till the end of the quarter. I know I personally have had those discussions with demand gen marketers and just been like, hey, so, you know, this particular campaign, I'm just going to flip it, this campaign here that we spent $27,000 on, you know, we only got 4 cents. So that's really not that great. And I had that discussion at the end. Whereas with Datarama, we can say, okay, this campaign that we spent 20K on so far, having, you know, less than 5 cents return, we're going to flip the remainder of that to one of our higher performing ones. So that way we can maximize our dollars as much as we can. This goes across, you know, your content. You spend tons of money and time and love into building it. So knowing what's working, what's not, so that way you can act right away. And all of this is done in real time.
So firstly, thanks for that great overview of Datarama, Sarah. And I guess we just want to wrap now with one key comment that we've been talking about during this presentation, being so important. There is a lot you can do in a marketing strategy. There's a lot you can do with content. There's a lot you can do with technology. Our main guidance is don't swing for the fences in your first attempt. Make sure when you're looking at putting this together, you think about how to structure success with that meaningful starting point of crawling to put in that high value, lower hanging fruit information that you can really leverage quickly and then expand from there. So we often see clients putting in, for example, Journey Builder and Email Studio and ad audiences with it connected to Salesforce CRM as a first implementation, and then potentially following on with SMS and mobile push as they get more engaged with what's in place, or bringing in Interaction Studio as a way to perform web listening and put some of that together. There are a series or a number of ways you could think about this. The most important thing I'd say is just make sure you think about phasing this, unlock the keys of the technology, and then learn, iterate, and get better. Don't look for perfection out of the gate, because that comes with effective testing and starting and trialing and learning. So with that, I think we are going to go to questions. And I will just call up the question list for a second and see what we have that we're off. I'll just sharing so we can see everyone's lovely faces here. The first question we have is, do we need, this is in the context of Datarama, probably a good one for you to answer here, Sarah. Do you need all the other Salesforce studios for Datarama to be effective?
That's a great question. So no, Datarama is agnostic, product agnostic. As you saw, there is tons of APIs that we can connect directly to many different platforms. We do obviously recommend using Datarama in tangent or in combination with our Marketing Cloud suite, just because it does have that native integration and it works so nicely with the cross-channel capabilities. So just all in all, making your full product span easier. But nope, can totally be agnostic.
Next question here. This one's for Chris. Okay. What are some of the traps you can fall into with personas? Like, do you find some clients overdo it, some clients underdo it?
Yeah, I think that the trend would be that most of us overdo it when developing personas. That we've got too many personas, and then when we realize that we need to produce, 8 or 10 pieces of content for each persona, and then we do the math, we realize that we've got a lot of content to produce. Plus, we have to plug it into all of these different journeys. So for me, I think starting with 3 is a nice rule of thumb, and then expanding from there. Something that's interesting to note: we also, develop personas for people that are not customers or prospects, but for job seekers, or how we want to deliver content to some of those other people that engage with our brand or with our business or with our client's business on a regular basis. So you can use personas in a variety of different ways.
Yeah, and one of the other things I'd add there too is I find it's really good not just to think of, like, personas are a fantastic way of conceptualizing your audiences and putting content around it, but thinking about ways to operationalize your personas so you actually have that information in the data can really help you have good creative, but serve up relevant creative to people as well. So thinking about taking that further is a really good way to do things. Checking some of the other questions here. Next question, what would we see as some of the journeys you would tend to prioritize in the first phase of an implementation? Maybe I'll take that one if you guys are okay.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think what we see there primarily is there are some pretty straightforward journeys that are really important to stand up. First one is your welcome series. So once someone offers up their known information, it's a perfect opportunity for you to explain what your brand is all about, what your value proposition is, and to drive that opportunity for progressive profiling to learn more about that person to continue engagement. One of the most important things, and one of the reasons we see that being a journey versus a monthly campaign or something like that, is people remember you when they've done something recently with you. And if you send an email out later, there's thousands of emails people are getting in any given week, and they just won't spend time with it. Get that email out in a timely way, definitely within an hour of that first sign up, ideally in real time. They will start to engage and look for those emails. So there's a lot of evidence to show we'll get higher conversion rates, higher deliverability, and that really improves the later engagement. So it's the perfect time to get your brand message out there and to drive forward. The other pieces obviously is that post-purchase communication, a great time to set expectations, to make sure people know what they expect, and to upsell into accessories and other products before the order actually ships. So that's a very important part. And then looking at those journeys in the abandonment cycle or between that welcome and that first purchase is another really good thing. And as Sarah touched on, the other easy to stand up and high value ones are things like the webinar or seminar registration and sign up process, things like filling out a form on a gated page on a site. All of those are fantastic ones to stand up. And then next question, Sarah, maybe I'm not sure if you'd like to have a go at this one, but what are some of the key elements that are good to have in place before you embark on a marketing cloud implementation?
Yeah, definitely. Amazing question. So first and foremost, obviously having some data in place, any kind of data, just so you can start kind of driving your marketing cloud in a data-driven manner and any of your journeys in a data-driven manner. That is really important to have. If you are in the beginning of your journey, that's totally okay. We've had a ton of our customers that are at the beginning and have had zero to no data. And really our partners like Traction on Demand with David and Chris can help you start building that pieces up from the get-go in Marketing Cloud. Other things that you can definitely have is just a good idea of what it is you're trying to achieve, just a starting point. So having a couple campaigns in the back of your head for your different life cycle stages, like your awareness, acquire, so you can start kind of putting those out and testing them. Those are definitely some good areas to have in place before embarking on an implementation. David or Chris, was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
That was it. I just sent a note to everyone saying, please mention that a recording will be made available and sent via email afterwards. But we all know that. It's funny, David, we joked about that in advance of this. I've gone and I've done it. I've messaged everyone.
Well, that's great. And thanks, Chris and Sarah, for joining this webinar. It's been fantastic to have this conversation. And I hope for all the participants that you've got some value out of we've been talking about today. Obviously, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And as Chris said, we'll be sending out a recording of this presentation so you can listen to it at your leisure or go to sleep by it or whatever you may prefer. But thanks again to everyone, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Evan Jen. Thank you, James. Everyone who's responding in the live chat.